Warning! This episode contains explicit language, emo poetry, and unresolved childhood trauma. Also, there'll be spoilers for part 1 of Murtagh, the 5th novel in the World of Eragon by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who also wrote poetry during his most emo phase. Yes, it was as self-absorbed as you're imagining. But to be fair, I was in film school, and I thought I was being artsy. Just so artsy. Murtagh, on the other hand, I don't know.
Well, I'm Jackie Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast where we've got our eyeliner pencils sharpened and ready to head once more, Dane, with our emo boy unto the breach.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
And if you'd like to be a hero like Rachel V, use the link in our show notes to support us on Patreon. Thank you, Rachel. You're awesome. And if you don't want to be like Rachel, we totally understand. And just ask that you please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, thank you to Rachel. And I'm sure you guessed this already, but you can check out our website at isthisjustfantasypod.com or follow us on social media at isthisjustfantasypod on TikTok and at justfantasypod on Instagram.
Fantastic.
So before we get back to our regularly scheduled World of Eragon shenanigans with our new leading anti-hero, I did want to do a quick recap of the original inheritance cycle to see how we got here. You know how quick these always are, Dave.
Yeah, and if you just joined us, I got good news. There's a lot more episodes if you start with Eragon.
Yes, so true. But 4 books, maybe 6 minutes. Let's do it. So we open on a baby boy, hint of eyeliner and side swept bangs on his brow, born to a morally gray mother and just a straight up evil father in secret at their summer estate. The empire is in turmoil as the terrorists are ramping up their campaign of destruction, and our young hero winds up orphaned with some Selena-shaped abandonment issues and a wicked sword scar. But at least he's rid of his abusive father, so that's a mixed bag hot out of the gates.
And scars are cool.
And scars are cool. And that mixed bag only gets mixeder when Murtagh gets adopted, but by the insane, genociding, murder wizard Emperor Galbatorix. He spends his adolescence being largely ignored by the king, finding solace only in his swordmaster, an actual positive father figure, his mentor and horse, Tornak. But shit starts to go sideways when Gal gives our growing boy his first mass murder assignment, and Murtagh's casual, polite refusal entails his escape from the capital and the death of Tornak. But Murtagh has a gruff, man-on-the-run character to get into, so he decides to step his teenage rebellion up about a million notches to stalk Gal's boogie boy henchman, and he ends up getting a sweet 2-for-1 deal when he stumbles upon the rumored new rebel dragon rider while he's at it. Murtagh rescues this hapless bean farmer, who's accompanied by a totally normal small-town storyteller wielding the very sword that gave him his scarf. Small empire, I guess. But although he's able to save the lives of the boy wizard and his dragon, the old man, who it turns out did kill his dad, doesn't make it, which leaves Murtagh on babysitting duty. His dweeby new sword bro is dead set on joining the terrorists, and Murtagh helps him make it to their secret headquarters, complete with a prison break, elf napping, incomprehensible horse chase, and emo flair to spare. But the hits keep coming when the tough but fair and drop-dead gorgeous terrorist king president realizes our guy is the son of public enemy number 2 and the adopted son of public enemy number 1.
A bit of a problem.
It does get Murtagh locked up in a pretty sweet Club Fed type joint, but he gets a shot to earn his freedom by fighting with the Varden against the Empire's horde of monstrous Urgles. So I guess restorative justice. And even though he acquits himself admirably on the winning side of the battle, his good deed does not go unpunished when he's abducted by a matching set of bald spies and spirited right back into the open arms of Galbatorix.
Never trust twins. That's what I say.
Exactly. Which is where Murtagh's mixed bag takes a turn for the definitively fucked up and torturous. While he's in high security lockup in Urobane, one of Gal's remaining dragon eggs hatches for him, giving the insane murder wizard the leverage of a soul-bonded baby dragon over him. Galbatorix binds both Murtagh and his dragon by their true names using dark magics and reserves of Eldenari to get them some unholy gains, revealing along the way that Murtagh's erstwhile sword bro is in actuality his brother. So with the angst dialed up to peak dashboard confessional, Murtagh is loosed on the terrorists at the Burning Plains, where he and Thorn kill the king of the dwarves, put the beat down on Eragon and Saphira, and steal his dad's sword from the bean farmer as a cherry on top, before they defy Gal's orders and leave their enemies embarrassed as hell, but free for the time being.
It's one hell of a day.
Yes. And that little dust-up really kicks the war into high gear, which means Murtagh is busier than ever at work. He rolls up for a secondary skirmish near the Burning Plains, where he finds out his punk-ass brother now has an elven support entourage, and Murtagh barely escapes to limp his way back to Urobane. His shitty boss does not take this well, which means it's time to grab his favorite crazy dragon souls and train up to face off with the main elven host to stall the two-front war at Gilead. But he really cannot catch a break, because who just has to enter the chat at Gilead, Dane? A surprise ancient rider and his dragon.
Yoga Daddy.
The Yoga Daddy, R.I.P. Luckily, Murtagh's boss does a little magical drone warfare to kill those guys, but even if the actions aren't Murtagh's, all the emo guilt sure is. And his next foray into combat is just as mixed of a bag, really a theme in his story, because while he loses Drasleona to the Varden, he also gets to post-battle kidnap their queen president, who happens to be the lady he had the hots for when he was in terrorist jail. Every once in a while, things really come up Murtagh.
And they say love is dead.
I mean, if you don't count the fact that Gal makes him torture her for weeks on end, and his own victim complex somehow forces him to complain to her about how rough he has it, yeah, love's not dead.
The will they, won't they situation.
Yeah, maybe they can make it work, those crazy kids. It definitely helps that when Eragon comes knocking at the capital to face off once and for all, Murtagh finesses the shit out of that situation to both lose his duel with his brother without really losing, which changes the fundamentals of his identity and provides just the opening his, what did you call them? Bros from different foes?
Yeah.
Just the opening Eragon needs to eviscerate Gal once and for all, which leaves the Sword Bros to part on a shaky-ass truce brought to you by Nickelback and Angst as Murtagh and Thorn fly into the sunset. Are you ready to see what they've been up to since then, Dane?
I have never been more ready in my life.
I didn't think so. When we saw the book coming out was Murtagh focused, the scream you scrumped was...
I was so excited.
Yes.
So, well, I do want to say, before we dive into this book and start breaking it down, I want to give everyone a bit of a heads up on what to expect this season. It's a little different. I think we'll end up with fewer episodes this season, somewhere around 5, mainly because this book is obviously a big shift in the series focus and seems to clearly be the first in a new phase of the World of Eragon.
Yeah.
For the most part, this book is a character study on our favorite emo boy, which it plants a lot of seeds for the future of the story and Alagazi as a whole, but that's really not its main focus. So we have less we're able to discuss concretely compared to the original series.
Yeah, just a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, for instance, there is no training montages or ancient dragons of old to give us long symposiums on the functions and, all of that of the secret ancient histories and all that stuff.
Much to my chagrin in this book, there is no magic school, which would have obviously given us just a lot to latch onto lore-wise.
Yeah.
But also magic school. I love it.
Exactly. So for this reason, we decided to follow the flow of the story as it's broken down in the book, aligning with the plot beats and vibe Christopher Paolini intended, we think.
Imagine that. We just thought, here's a book. Let's break it down into episodes the way it's broken down in the book.
Exactly. So part 1 is going to be covered in this episode. It's in its entirety. Part 2 in the next episode. Part 3, I think we're going to break down into 2 episodes.
Yep.
And part 4 and 5 should be our last episode.
Yes.
But enough with the housekeeping. I need to get to our emo
You're
lone
done
warrior.
Dusting. It's time to get to Murtagh.
Yeah, I missed our baby boy.
Yes.
All right, here we go. Chapter 1. Madden died. We snap into this book with Thorn and Murtagh instantly having to do what I just imagine is kind of like the norm for Riders and Dragons to do. Separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Murtagh has to go to town, and I mean, even if they weren't lying low, from the whole
Not on the run.
Yeah, he can't take the dragon down the main street.
I guess not. Yeah.
He's a chunky boy.
Yes. Thorn remember, is particularly chunky. He's a big boy.
He's got them gains. This chapter truly can be summed up by saying that Murtagh goes for a walk into Seanon, and that's really it.
That's what I've got. He goes for a walk.
There you go. That's your turn. No,
Dane, he's emo. He thinks about a lot of shit in this chapter.
Yeah, there's a lot of ruminating.
Yeah.
The vibes of Seanon, let's start there.
Okay.
Pretty rustic, pretty scenic.
Lovely.
Cold fishing village near the near the spine.
Yes, up north, right?
Yes,
okay.
exactly. And I'm picturing like Boston accents. And,
I love that. I pictured that not at all from the short story, and now I'm like, oh, absolutely. Yes, he has like a wicked car.
Yeah, exactly.
kind of vibe.
Exactly. It's our only good glimpse of Seanon. We did get it in the regular series. I don't know if you remember. When Eragon called Queen Azanzadi for the very important Sloane conversation, you'll remember that she was cleaning her bloody hands.
Oh, yeah.
Because she had just murdered people near Seanon.
I love that. Yeah, it was right when the elves got on the march for the war,
yeah,
right?
That's what they took first.
Swept from the forest to like destroy this town.
Yes.
Great.
and claim it back for the good guys. Anyway, we have that. I do think also that like when Eragon was putting down rebellions at the end of the book of Inheritance.
Oh, yes.
I do think he made a flyover here.
Okay, on his victory tour.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that aside, there are some interesting takeaways.
Okay.
At the start, we have Thorn mentioning how everyone in Algasia fears them. So they don't really need to hide on the account of the whole like World War thing, and they were on the bad side.
That's the spirit, Thorn.
Yeah, so they should go wherever the hell they want to without splitting up. Which kind of leads these two guys to like joke about mass murder and burning down the village of Seanon.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, which as an intro to their vibe it's really awesome. These two are not Eragon and Saphira.
No. I mean Saphira did maybe advocate for a couple mass murder type situations, and like the haughtiness of like everyone's terrified of us. That feels all dragon to me, but this is the levity with which they treat this really different.
When Eragon was talking about like just killing everyone in Drasleona, that was like serious.
Yeah, he
right?
was, unfortunately. Yes.
This is like intentionally funny.
Yeah.
And I do think Thorn already is much funnier than Saphira.
Okay,
seems.
yeah.
Because he's trying at humor. It's not that he is a dragon that's funny.
No, he's just making jokes.
Yeah, he's working on his material.
Yeah. He's workshopping his new special.
Exactly. And fun tidbit I liked here in this conversation, Thorn calls Zarok Murtagh's Sharpened Affliction.
Oh.
And if you're listening right now and you have a band and you're looking on the name, Sharpened Affliction, that's the one.
10 out of 10, I'd say. If you play any instruments, you're one, already more talented than Dane and I, but two, you should name your band Sharpened Affliction.
Also, this gave me a context for this sword that I did not have until this moment. I always thought this was different.
Okay.
In the first few books, especially when he takes it in Eldest.
Yeah.
Maybe because I read it as a kid, but like I thought he wanted and like cherished Zarok.
Enjoyed having it.
But we know Thorn's in his mind, and he calls it the Sharpened Affliction. So, it's like his tool that's a wound. It just is
that makes
weird.
a lot of sense. Yeah. I think you get swayed in that original series because it is like a priceless sword. It's a better sword than any other sword. So you think about it in terms of that when Murtagh takes it. And then I think this whole level of like his dad's such a piece of shit.
Yes.
And the sword gave him that scar is like, oh yeah, he would not love this.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, no time for that because there's anxiety abound in this chapter.
Yes.
Thorn's
so
an
true.
anxious boy.
Yes.
While Saphira was while Saphira was always more worried when Eragon left for his safety.
Yeah.
Like if they separated, Thorn is like scared when Murtagh leaves. He's like, does not want him to go.
Yes, it's almost more like throwaway comment that's something Saphira would say, which is like every time you go somewhere, you get into trouble.
Yeah.
But that was just the first intro to it, and then Thorn kind of expands on what that fear is afterwards.
It feels very different. Yeah,
Yes.
It feels very differently. Anyway, it gets even sadder as Murtagh goes into the village, thinking about how no one has ever been through the experiences they have.
Yes.
And I take this to mean the torture and forced slavery by Gavatorix, and thus they will always be together.
Yeah.
I thought the dragon bond was the reason they'd always be together, but I guess it's trauma.
Yeah.
It's the real magic.
The real magic's been trauma bonding all along.
And it's weird because the way this is written, and this is the introduction, this is like we're just with them. This is the first time we've been in their heads.
Yeah.
And there's already, I'm feeling a role reversal. I'm feeling here, Murtagh is clearly the leader of the two, if any of the two are leaders. If anything, Saphira to me always felt more wise and self-assured. She was kind of like the leader of the Eragon Saphira bond. And this already feels like, no, Murtagh's in charge. And Thorn he's comforting and taking care of.
Yes, it's like with Saphira and Eragon, if push comes to shove, she might let Eragon do what he thinks is right, but the whole point is that she would have to allow it. And that's not really what the vibe is here.
No, there is a definite vibe change, which I like because they're different, right? Yeah. Anyway, before I wrap things up, some things about Murtagh we learned here.
Yeah, you have a laundry list of new fun facts about your baby boy.
Yeah. Do you see that? I'm like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
He gets a panic attack when he starts to muse on Gal and Sharugan, and it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just like mentions their stuff in his head, and he starts to freak out.
Yeah, that's true. I did notice that.
Yeah, he also is a method actor a la Brahm. He's got a beard, he takes a false name, and he's thinking through his story as he walks towards Xenon.
We do love when they do character work. Yes. We do love when they go full method.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so goofy too, because aren't they like preternaturally like tall and strong?
Yes.
It's like I can't imagine any of these dudes are blending in anywhere, but like I'm buying it. They're really committed to the bit.
Well, at least he thinks he is, right?
Yes.
Anyway, it turns out he's also an organized and clean king. I'm getting. There's a lot of like bits here about cleanliness.
That's so true.
The cleanliness of others.
Big clean girl aesthetic vibes. Yeah. Same, Murtagh.
We also know, being in Murtagh's hack now, that he had a fine education, better than most we've been with in this story.
Okay.
Well, more than Roran and Eragon.
Low bar?
Yeah. Basically, Galbatorix had a lot of faults. Gal had some faults.
Hey.
All right?
Hey, don't you turn your back on your boy. You really upped him throughout the original series.
I don't know what you're talking about. If you're new here, I never did. But education was something he might have had a better take on than Garrow.
I mean, not now. Again, bar is low.
I gotta say it. I hate doing it. But I'm inclined to agree with Gal here.
You hate to do it.
I hate
you
to
hate
do
to
it.
see it.
There
it is.
Our haunting Uncle Daddy was not on point like our evil daddy was about education. All right?
A shame.
Goddamn elites are using education to gain the system. You know, maybe
even in a fantasy world.
It's just Galbatorix being sent to prison for like paying for Murtagh to get into places.
For SAT prep and like college resumes. Womp.
Yeah. Anyway, Murtagh, he gets inside the city. He's in Xenon, and Murtagh sees a dwarf, and he has to hide. You know. Because he killed Hrothgar.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Our Dwarven daddy. And we learn that the dwarfs are all over the Empire now.
Oh, yeah.
And they serve as traders and merchants and guards.
Traders, Dane?
Yes.
What did they do?
Traitors.
Are they against? No, traders.
Traders. And it's tough for Murtagh because, first off, very exciting. They're everywhere. I love that.
Yes.
Can't wait to get more of that.
Yes.
But because we love dwarfs, right?
Obviously. I mean, Christopher Paolini loves the dwarf.
Yeah, it's clear
he
that
talks about it.
The way you talk about Trondheim, I'm just like, you love a dwarf.
Yes, and I do love that they're proliferated even to some of these like what seem like smaller
areas, villages,
and you just wonder about how deeply that's going to change the culture in Alagasia.
Well, also in Alagasia, we are as far from Trondheim as you can get. I mean, you can go further up the spine, but on the map, we are up there.
Yeah.
So cool for the dwarves.
Yes.
It is tough for Murtagh. I mean, he reflects that this isn't even just a dwarf thing. The elves also hate him for the whole, Oramus and Glader thing. Yoga daddy. And then he does get some hate from the humans and reflects that because he's kind of a traitor twice. You know what I mean?
No.
So Murtagh's just hated as he walks in to meet his contact at the Folsom Feast, which is a
in name.
But it's a rough start of this book. Very emo for sure.
Yes.
And as we end this chapter, Murtagh is very much the outsider, walking through the city, looking inside at all the. I'm thinking like warm, like glows from windows as he walks by.
It's the holidays,
cold,
right?
Yes,
like, aren't they? Didn't they just celebrate a big holiday?
Okay, let's just, even if it's not, there's Christmas trees.
Yes.
And
I think whatever fish festival this is like not quite. The Mattintide is not quite Christmas, but I'm imagining like a big lit up fish in everybody's house.
Yes, this movie opens with Dashboard Confessional already playing.
Absolutely.
With a voiceover of him musing about how hard his life is. That's the vibe.
And he's not wrong in a lot of it.
Unfortunately, not for him. But that's the first chapter.
Yes, that takes us to chapter 2, The Folsome Feast. And just like that, we're right back in the short story world of forks and tween rage. Only this time it's from Murtagh's POV. So if you missed our little bonus season on The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, you can hear a lot of this there. But it's more fun from Murtagh's point of view. So
it is.
I'm going to talk about it again. He starts his campaign at the quintessential fantasy pub, Very D&D. Excited to get some food he didn't have to cook. He thinks about that a lot.
So funny.
Yes. And he's anxiously awaiting this meeting with his like greasy ass associate. He does not think fondly of this man.
Of course he's meeting a greasy ass associate. We just went through how rugged and horrible his life is.
Yes.
You know?
He can't just associate with nice people who want to like help him out to find the information he wants. It has to be somebody seedy.
Do you think this is a self-fulfilling prophecy kind
Yes.
of? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I think until you said that, I hadn't really thought about it
Me
that
either.
way. But like 100%, he's like seeking out the like lower echelons of society.
Okay, we had not talked about this before this episode, but like it's just hitting me that maybe this is all this is. You are who you like think you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think very much in Murtagh's mind, he could never just go to a normal informational network or anything like that. He has to be like below
Yes, it's gonna be rugged.
in the dregs of society.
Yeah.
But right off top, he does think about Tornak. So he remembers at least a time where he associated with noble
Normal.
and kind people.
Played by Will Ferrell, by
Yes, but he actually, it's not the man, it's the horse.
the way. Oh, he's thinking of the horse.
Jump scare.
Also played by Will Ferrell.
I'm sold. I'd be so down. Actually, if they ever cast it to have like the flashbacks of Tornak be Will Ferrell and then like a voice for the horse also be Will Ferrell.
And I want Will Ferrell playing a very serious role.
100%.
Yes.
No other way.
No.
But I do like that Murtagh like can't keep his thoughts away from musing on the welfare of his mentor horse. He's like, where did that guy go? And I'm like, I think last count he was in Trondheim when Murtagh got kidnapped, and we thought,
did he potentially go to Roran?
I don't think so. I think he stayed in Trondheim, and we thought it's possible the dwarves brought Tornak when they marched, but we never really saw where he ended up in the war, I don't think.
The only one we know about is Snowfire, right?
Yes, Roran has Snowfire for sure.
And then
Guarantee.
And then Caddock.
Caddock got sold.
Grandpa
dog.
horse.
Yeah.
He was definitely like rode by an Empire soldier in the war.
Oh, no.
For sure.
I had never thought about that. Yeah, because they sold him somewhere like...
In Gilead?
Yes, after running from Gilead, maybe.
Yes.
When they were trying to escape all the Urgles. So yeah, he probably would have been conscripted.
Lord Barst, that horse. Did he throw? Was one of the horses Lord Barst threw? Caddock?
Oh no, I was going to say, no wonder Lord Barst was so strong. He was riding a magical horse.
Oh, that's right.
Well, Murtagh is interrupted from his angst-filled waiting and thinking of horses by the appearance of the innkeeper's young daughter, the girl named Essie, with her thick Boston accent.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Boston accent now.
Yes. I think this is something I maybe only picked up like on a little bit in the short story, but in Murtagh's point of view, his like courtly manners and patterns of speech really jumped out at me as he talked to Essie. I think because it's his thoughts on top of the way he's talking, but I think we're clearly fleshing out so much more of his character in all these little ways, like things that are very different from what we're used to in this series.
From our Bean Boy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Murtagh very much had, like, it feels a little bit like he's putting on airs, and it takes a minute for me to remember, like, no, he's just like this. Like, he's
also put on a little bit of airs.
I mean, I think especially when it feels very poignant as he's talking to a child. That he's like, my lady, and like, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But to that point, I think this scene with Essie also seems to be seeding a character cornerstone for Murtagh here that revolves around his drive to protect children, maybe just the innocent writ large, but here it definitely is focused on children. I think the way he's treating her, the way he's relating to her, very much gets at the idea that like he has a real soft spot for kids and very much worries about them being in danger.
Yeah,
in
makes
any
total
kind
sense.
of trouble. Yes, absolutely. Essie spills the tea to Murtagh about the pickle she's in with the Sionon's like burgeoning Regina George character, and just as he's starting to give her some advice that he should really take himself about facing your problems head on instead of running.
That's so funny. To
I know.
hear him
I
say
was
this.
like, dude, come on, Murtagh, you're right there.
Do as I say, not as I do. You know?
Yes, exactly. Just as he's failing to be self-reflective about that at all, they're interrupted by Saros, filed teeth and all. Remember that?
Yeah, that guy was gross.
Ugh. Murtagh lets the literal child sit on in on his meeting with this guy.
Okay, bad choice. This is a bad choice.
Yeah, it's like, I thought we were doing pretty well at like.
Yeah, they were on the same
gentle
levels.
parenting.
Yeah,
Like
gentle parenting.
No.
Murtagh is a gentle parenter for sure.
But he was doing pretty well until he was like, you know what, this seems dangerous. You want to stay?
You want to stay right here?
Child? Well,
Do you think he thought that it was going to limit danger? Do you think that's why he did it?
I don't think so, because I think from what we've seen, that would make a little bit of sense. And we do know Murtagh's pragmatic, but as much as he likes kids, I do not think he would use one in that way. Like, be so
agreed.
cynical about it, you
So
know?
then why? Yeah, well.
I think he really thinks he's bonded with this girl, and he like wants her to see something of the outside world, because she's talking, remember, about running away from town.
That's right.
And like, I think maybe as best I can do on his behalf is like, maybe he's thinking this will give her a little insight into how like
She should stay home.
oh yeah, how wild the outside world is, and
Yeah.
like how many different types of people are there. And I think maybe also he like wants to show her a little bit that he's like cool. He's like, I'm a cool guy.
I'm a cool
I'm
uncle.
investigating mysteries with this shitty dude.
Yes, for sure.
I think so. So Saros whips out this like smoldering egg smelling stone that Murtagh set him to searching for. So we know right away Saros has done his job, has found this intel that Murtagh's been on the hunt for. It sounds like for a while.
Whatever it was.
Yes, and everything Saros describes about the place where he found the stone seems ripped from the headlines of Umarath's warning at the end of Inheritance.
Yes.
So it seems like a really bad idea for Murtagh to be pursuing this in the first place. I do remember in the short story being kind of surprised, like, my guy, this is...
Seems adjacent at best.
Yeah,
like,
well, it's
come
like,
on, man.
dude, why is this your life's mission right now? You could be doing anything post-war, and like what you want to do is directly like delve into the thing you were warned not to do.
Yeah, that sounds. But see, with everything we know about Murtagh in the past, he's the man who makes his own way.
I
all right,
know.
he doesn't listen to anybody. He listens to his soul,
I'm
Jackie.
like, dude, literally the wisest being you've ever interacted with said no, but naturally you are just gonna do this shit anyway.
He's like a guy who like you tell him what not to do, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna do that.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
That actually sounds really fun and like a good idea. Like it needs my attention.
100%.
Yes, but after Saros presents this first bit of information, Murtagh is like plying him for more, and payment comes up, which seems to be a bit of a sticking point for
Yes.
Saros, to put it lightly. He's apparently decided to just rob Murtagh instead of paying him. I think Murtagh even thinks like, damn, I never should have paid him so much in the first place.
Yeah.
That was dumb. He does know I'm rich now.
More courtly, like a rich guy about problems.
Yes,
essentially.
exactly. He's like, oh, I threw my money around way too willingly, and now I'm in a pickle because of it.
Yeah.
So that means we wrap up this chapter as the thug puts a knife to Essie's throat in an attempt to secure that bag from Murtagh. He's like, oh, you know what I should do is threaten that kid. That'll get me my money.
And like that would be shocking, but we have heard this before, right?
It's so true.
So chapter 3, Fork and Blade. So now that violence is imminent, Murtagh gets to dehumanizing Saros so he can kill him and his men pretty much instantly. It's haunting.
Yes, it was kind of a surprise. Obviously, we know what's happening from the short story, but
Yeah.
it was a little bit surprising to be in Murtagh's head as he's like, well, they're not people anymore. And you're like,
Oh, wow.
uh-oh.
Yeah, he describes it as no longer thinking Saros as a person or a thing, but just a problem.
Yeah, problem to be solved.
And this is metal, dude.
Yeah, solve it,
is
Murtagh.
brutal. Look at start the metal, cue it up. Anyway, first he starts out with some spells, but they don't work.
Yes.
Saros has a raven skull amulet that protects him and his men from magic. He like shows it off.
Yes, which also, like, the more we think about it, the more we read through the story, it's like, my dude, keep that a secret. Why do you feel like you need to flex like that? It's like Murtagh could just, I think he'd be more scared if Saros didn't try to explain it.
It's funny because I think it feeds into what Murtagh can't stop himself from. Saros is like, see this? We got you. And he's like, well, I'm going to take that.
Yeah,
You know what I
I
mean?
gotta have that, and I'm gonna find out what that's all about.
Yeah, so obviously Murtagh pivots from spells to the name of names.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it also doesn't work.
Yeah.
So whatever the hell this raven amulet magic is, it's fucking powerful.
Yes.
The innkeeper dad kind of finally notices his daughter is in a hostage situation at this point.
Yeah, not what you want.
It's a little late to the game, to be honest. But he's instantly down by two henchmen.
No, he because he was on alert when all the henchmen came in, and he like grabs his club. I think Murtagh even thinks like, hey, that guy's got the measure of he was kind of glad to see the innkeeper
Yeah.
like know what his business is about, and
as they walked towards his child. So he was like, oh, that's probably fine.
I don't know. That's probably fine. And then as soon as he tries to like enter the fray and save his little girl, they're like, oh no, bro. And like instantly punch him to the floor.
Yeah. So he's out. And now Murtagh's had enough.
Yeah.
So they're all forked now. That's what I'll say. Murtagh gets to it, quickly saving the girl and dispatching his enemies with a fork. It's unforking believable, I have to say. All jokes I made.
You have to say.
Yeah, all jokes I made in our last season. If you'd like to have a bat at that, listen to that.
Listen, fork puns never get old, Dane.
No, they do not.
I mean, I'm still here laughing at them, and I read them, edited them, heard them live last time, and then again read them, edited them, and I'm hearing them live right now, being like, unforking believable. That's a
classic. You a true friend. At one point, he uses his cloak and comments on their skills, and is Murtagh a dandy?
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. He's like a certain panache when he uses his cape to fight. It's very like Three Musketeers to me.
100%. I mean, think about it with all the like cleanliness and the like
my lady
thoughts about his out. He's a dandy, dude.
Yeah. He's like a courtly dandy.
100%.
I love it. I love it. Anyway, he stabs the dude through the chest, deflects swords with his fork, smashes dudes with chairs, throws his fork through a man's skull.
That was the wildest one, for sure.
Ugh. Talking about put a fork in it.
That guy is done.
Yeah, seriously. He just generally kicks ass, which I love. Sarah spits out some last words about like weird zealot cult shit and dreams. He foams at the mouth and dies. It's all very crazy.
The foaming at the mouth was really
shocking.
A lot.
Yeah. Again, it would have been more shocking if it wasn't in the short stories, but I was shocked again. Because I was like, oh, that's right. He like dies this way.
It's shocking, Cotton.
Let's see how that pans out for him. Anyway, so are these guys using poison pills?
Ooh.
False teeth? Is it a magic thing? Is someone watching? I have so many questions.
Given that we're in fantasy world, I've got to go magic thing, but close second would be poison pills. What's your ultimate read on this? What do you think?
Saros doesn't really look like, I mean, I guess he has the amulet, but I was going to say he doesn't look like he's like flush in magical raiments. I feel like one magical amulet that's powerful probably all you're getting. But I don't know. It was weird. So
if it's tied to the amulet, magic makes sense. But I also guess I have trouble with Saros taking a poison pill to like protect whatever his secret order is because he's kind of a little bitch. So that's I don't see him having the courage to be like, I must die to protect my secrets.
Totally agree. We don't really know much about Saros, but I'll also agree. A little bitch. He threatened a kid.
Yeah.
That's not great.
No.
But anyway, everyone in the inn, I mean, pretty realistically is spooked. But the innkeeper, now up on his feet, helps out Murtagh, telling him to beat it before the fuzz get here. And Murtagh throws him some coin, and he's like, clean up. So it was a fun little ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was nice of that guy. Like, he didn't have to let Murtagh go.
No, and Murtagh didn't have to give him money. It's a nice little exchange. Murtagh heads out, but not before he tells the girl that, quote, sometimes you have to stand and fight. Sometimes running away isn't an option.
Isn't it, Murtagh? It's like, dude, you spent the whole walk to this town thinking about like, I'm in such a pickle. I want to be with Niswata and like be a person in the empire, but like my reputation is too bad and there's nothing I can do about it. You know what I should do is just like run away and solve mysteries on my own. It's like, dude,
come on, man.
Come on.
So close. And ask her if she understands that whole thing. And I love this. This little girl just saw this stranger kill 7 men with a fork. Of course, she's going to agree with whatever he says.
She's like, that sounds good,
Yeah, sure, sir. I cackled when he gave her the fork and asked her to name it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking Teenager Tines or something like that. Or you got any fork names? Maybe Sassy Skewer.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like Sassy Skewer. I was thinking more along the lines of like Arya, Game of Thrones, Needle kind of vibes.
I mean, that's fine, but George R.R. Martin already did that.
Yes, I guess.
We don't.
I guess Sassy Skewer is better than Needle. You're right.
Yes.
You're right.
That's what Arya should have named her.
Not now.
Anyway, there's no time to fork around with that. Murtagh does a last farewell to the innkeeper's family and heals the girl. It's all very nice. Although I thought it was a little weird that he went into the dad's head to make sure that there was no abuse.
Yeah.
It says a lot about Murtagh's father and his own childhood, and also shows how how intense and I would say a little unhealthy Murtagh is.
That he would see a scar on a child and immediately be like, ooh, I'm going to have to do some digging to make sure.
Your dad definitely did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty sad.
Anyway, this chapter ends with some light thoughts.
Yeah?
What's it like to go a whole life without murdering people?
Oh, light. That's nice.
And the dangerous places Urmaroth told them not to go to.
Oh, also so nice.
Yeah.
Way to think about that, Murtagh, and then very much ignore it.
Yeah, the thoughts coming in, pretty dark. Thoughts going out, pretty dark.
Well, that does take us to chapter 4, Conclave, and it weirdly just gets super light, and the rest of this book is a fun romp.
Yeah, it's a little romp.
No. Murtagh runs his ass out of Siunan through their wholly unsecured gate. It's just like...
Yeah, it was very weird.
Maybe the war didn't leave everyone with the same level of PTSD that these people seem lax on security, especially with the alarm sounded because a mass murder just happened in one of their taverns.
I don't know. Maybe the elves improved it. Maybe they don't feel like they don't need security
Against
anymore.
all odds. I think they've improved it.
Exactly.
As he runs, Murtagh thinks of Eragon and their mad dash to Trondheim being one of the happiest times in his life, which struck me as really sad. Like, he's in this heightened state again, trying to run from the law. And he's like, you know what I miss? When my sword bro was my sword bro. We were on the run from all those Urgles. And I'm like, damn.
I miss when my sword bro had his dead mentor die in front of us and be imprisoned. That was
when I had a best friend and he was going through the worst time in his life.
We pushed our horses to the point of death.
Nearly murdered our horses. Yeah, he loved that. Which that to me is like, okay, that's really sad. It
is
like,
sad.
I think that's maybe the only time in his life he's had a friend.
It sounds like it.
Yes.
It sounds, I mean, we don't know much at this point, but it does sound like it.
But unfortunately, he does pivot from there to his thoughts of the deep and frankly irrational resentment he has of the only friend he's ever had for being born and killing their mom, which I was just like, oh, woof, Murtagh.
I did kind of like this, though, because there was a lot of criticism, I think, in those first books against Eragon for being cartoonishly, like...
Boy Scouty.
Yeah. And like Murtagh, that is a bad take. It's understandable, I guess, kind of from like a, he's traumatic. That was a traumatic experience. It's a traumatic situation to happen in your life. But like, also, dude, come on.
I think people in situations like that, unfortunately, in real life, tend to talk about how they grapple with those thoughts. I know a lot of parents who's like a lot of dads whose wives may unfortunately die in childbirth will talk about some feelings of resentment they might have towards their children, which is very sad but understandable. And I think I'm with you. I think I kind of like that this is in here just because it's like a person might think that.
Well, definitely different tone already. I mean, like all the stuff we've listed so far, but definitely there's a different tone.
Yes.
Right?
I'm just like, dude, do you think Elva's still in the therapy business? Do you think she's like cured Niswada and like maybe can
she helped some crazy dragons and now she's like, you know what? Let's go find Murtagh.
Hey, actually maybe some of those like insane but very zen Eldenari can help him too. Yeah. I don't know. I'm worried about him because he's definitely in some dark spirals.
Yes.
He makes it back to Thorn and they immediately head for the hills, obviously. They post up on a hilltop for the night so Murtagh can do some chores and download Thorn on everything that happened. He immediately gets to cleaning, which
hilarious.
Yes. He's cleaning furiously. All I feel like I could think about too is like I would always be on the verge of magical exhaustion. Like I'd be really pushing my powers to the brink almost every day, just trying to keep everything I own spotless in this like medieval kind of dirty, grimy time.
Like just like crazy for the time and setting.
Yeah.
Just like Clorox clean.
Yes, I'm like that anyway. So.
Also, sponsored by Clorox. No,
I do love the smell of bleach.
Oh gosh.
They are at an impasse, though, Murtagh and Thorn, about whether to keep on the Trail of Sorrows' intel. Thorn thinks that if Umaroth told them not to go poke this hornet's nest, these two idiots should probably heed the advice of the wise and ancient Dragon Soul.
Yeah, good thought, Thorn.
Yes, but our emo drama king is like, we don't have to go in the hornet's nest. I just want to stick my eye up to the peephole and see what's happening. Come on, it'll be fun. I'm like... Murtagh, listen to your dragon, dude.
No, this is the thing. There's a reversal. Yes,
he is stubborn as hell, and he has some like big, bold, italicized T trauma around feeling safe in this world, which again makes a lot of sense. I feel like it's some of these core like values when he thinks about resentment or he thinks about like something as basic as safety that he's never really had in his life that like always feel like a little bit of a gut punch to me or like a jump scare that I'm like, oh shit, if it's about that, it does lead him to ultimately convince Thorn to go out on this magical mystery tour because Thorn has those same traumas.
Yeah, they're like, the bond is like, I think the bond is a benefit in a lot of ways, but I think in this situation, it's like creating a loop.
Yes, I think so.
A loop of the feelings and thoughts.
Yes, and I think you're right, and I think you're also right about Murtagh having the upper hand because I think Thorn still does have a little bit of resistance, but the way we see them ultimately agree, like they seem to understand each other as deeply as Eragon and Saphira, but they seem to want and need different things in some ways, which is kind of interesting to me. I feel like that's not quite what we're used to with a dragon rider bond. Yeah. But the sincerity with which like Murtagh pitches this has me flip-flopping a little, like, because this is a bad I know this is a bad idea, disclaimer, but I'm like, it isn't always a bad idea, just like necessarily, even if it's wildly risky in this situation, to try working through your trauma by finding your values, like building your character, because that's kind of what Murtagh ends up getting at, is like, it would be really good for us to like figure out what we stand for and like fight against evil in this world. Inhabit the role of dragon riders is something they really bring up. And I'm like,
I mean,
that is a good way to work through some of your shit. It's like, it's dumb in this, scenario because we know it's so dangerous, but like,
I mean, there's a lot of other ways you could do that.
Yes. Of course.
There's a lot of other challenges they could face. Like maybe go face your brother.
Yeah. Maybe go.
That's a challenge.
Maybe go talk to somebody and work through some of your stuff that way.
They have Thorn face the dragons. That would be hard. Face Glader.
Yeah.
Face him. Deal with that.
Yes.
So I don't know. I do get what you're saying. I do think there's some truth to what he's thinking.
That's what I think. I think as he's pitching it to Thorn, I'm like, okay, not entirely no.
Right.
It makes sense. And it makes sense why Thorn would kind of hop on board after that, because he's like, yeah, we are dragon riders. We can go like stamp out some of the mysterious evils of this world on our own. That is kind of our job. And can we rebuild our reputations and heal some of this like pathological drive for safety by doing this? And it's like,
well, the greatest lies we tell ourselves, like the greatest lies are the lies we tell ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I think that's very much what I'm picking up here.
Right.
For sure. But with the what they're going to do decided on, agreed upon, they start to attend to the how, which turns out to be looking up an old like fuck buddy of Murtagh's in Gilead. They're like, so how are we going to find out more about this?
Yeah. So
and
funny.
Thorn's like, you know what? You should call that lady who's trying to get with you. And I'm also just like, your plan is to go back to the city where you famously murdered the last of the ancient riders and his dragon? Like, what could possibly go wrong?
This sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, it really does. I do like Thorn was a little funny. Like the ribbing between Murtagh and Thorn.
Yeah.
Very fun, very lighthearted, especially in the midst of all this like quagmire of internal turmoil,
They have a light bond. It's like, it's not light, but there is a lightness to the bond that is different.
Yes, there's a heaviness to the actual bond, but a levity to the way they treat it.
Yes. They seem like more friends.
Yeah.
Than like Eragon and Saphira seemed like one soul.
Yes.
These guys seem like buds,
Yeah, they definitely do. That's a good point. I also thought it was kind of funny that as Murtagh was shaving, since you mentioned he was a dandy, I'm thinking like, right before they left, he had to shave, and he's thinking about how he needs to get himself on a bulking cycle to give himself more spell power.
Hell yeah, man.
That seemed like something we touched on a little bit in School of Rock's 101 with Brahm and 201 with Ormus. But I was wondering if this like bigger equals more powerful logic makes sense to you, given what you know about the magic system. Like, is this something Murtagh maybe has wrong because he just doesn't know shit? Is he just trying to like be a dandy and look good? What do you think?
I think he's right.
I
think here's the thing. I don't think with everything we know about all the other energy and all the stuff that was expanded on, and then how like elves are different than humans, and so on and so on and so on. I don't know how this really works, but it does seem like the stronger you are as a person, the more like energy you can burn.
Yeah.
But like the energy to magic ratio. You know what I mean? We don't know how that works.
Yes,
so
I know.
how much more?
Yeah, I know we talked about it a little bit. It's definitely not, and I think Eragon maybe asks explicitly somewhere in the original inheritance cycle, like it's not just a mass equals more power, like straight up equation, but it's like the more you can do and like physically move and like
your vitality,
push around in real life,
your human life essence energy,
is going to lead to a bit of a bump in magical prowess. So I'm like, is your vitality increased by some time in the gym, Dane, do you think?
Always. But I also think like maybe there's a bit of something we haven't talked about before. Maybe the elves are more powerful in magic, not because of their bodies, but because of like a mystic monk internal energy, like a vitality of the soul.
Oh yeah,
so
I kind of like that.
Yeah, we've never really talked about that, but I could be that as well.
Headcanons abound.
Yeah, I'll be here all night.
Well, we wrapped up this chapter with Thorn taking the quintessential dragon party line of, well, shit or get off the pot. Like, let's go. Let's stop talking about it. Let's do it. He tells Murtagh now that they're decided on going to Gilead, there's no point in hesitating. So the chapter ends as they take off for the city to see what fresh hell awaits, Dane.
Which brings us to chapter 5. Dragonflight.
Yes.
Murtagh and Thorn seem a bit lost at the start here.
Yeah.
Murtagh's looking at an incomplete map he bought from a fur merchant. Classic, like, dude who just won't ask for directions, am I right?
Oh my God.
They do get a general idea, though, and start the journey.
I do like that your first chapter in this book is like, well, he walks to Siunon.
Yeah.
Has a lot of thoughts along the way. I cannot believe you missed the opportunity to say here, well, they fly to Gilead.
Yeah, seriously.
Have a lot of thoughts along the way.
They're going to have a lot of thoughts. Truly, 2 of these chapters in this first section are just like internally thinking through some stuff.
I think it makes sense, though. I mean, setting us up with a brand new character in a world we already know, I think requires a lot of his thoughts on things we know he should be thinking about.
Yes.
You know, you kind of need to get his takes. You need to get like what's going on with him since we saw him last.
Yeah, and the backdrop to it, I mean, even just this whole map thing is setting up just kind of like, not dire Murtagh situation is, but how like he really is roughing it on his own.
Yes.
You know, he doesn't really have help. So
yes, that makes sense. The way he thinks about like, oh, thank God I'm at this inn and somebody else has cooked my food.
Yes.
It's like that's what you would have been used to your entire life.
Yeah.
And now clearly for the last year you've been out on a limb.
You're going for it, man. But anyway, Murtagh hides Thorn with some magic.
Okay.
So they're not, detected.
That's good. Smart.
Which kind of leads us to Murtagh thinking about his own magical education.
Okay.
It's very limited to non-existent. Good old Gal was not big on sharing.
I thought he was into good education, but this was the limit of that.
This is secret, powerful information. You know what I mean?
Wow.
We learned his magical education started the same way as Roran and Eragon, but with bougie twist.
Okay.
Raising a golden coin from the king's hand.
I like. This is really a testament to how much you love Roran that you mention his magical education in this breakdown.
He's trying to lift that stone too.
Yeah, Eragon tried. Do you think he's still trying? I do.
I think he thinks of his brother.
He tried right till the end of Inheritance.
Yeah. I think he does it because like it'd still be handy.
I think so.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I do love the idea that like the 2 farmers had to start with stones and like Murtagh started with a golden coin and a king. It's just really funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, God taught him the only need to know information for the war.
Okay.
So since its freedom, Murtagh's been musing on the nature of magic and seems to be on the right track philosophically, I think.
Yeah.
What he is most interested in is the energy of magic. And I love reading this because it gives us some new insights into Murtagh and how his brain works and stuff.
Yeah.
He is a deep thinker in a very different way than Eragon. While Eragon seemed driven by the mastery and like obtaining of knowledge, Murtagh seems more driven by the understanding of like how things work.
Yes.
It's like the difference between looking at human beings from a sociological way and a philosophical way. You can get the same conclusion sometimes, but in very different ways.
Yeah, totally. And it's weird because the way Murtagh thinks about this is so much more ephemeral.
Yes.
Obviously, but I guess for me, it gets me thinking maybe it's living and being bonded, partnered with an engineer for so many years, but it feels very like engineering mindset to me that he wants to like break it apart, see how it works, figure out what different ways he can put it back together. I'm just like, oh yeah, if Ben could do magic, 100%.
That's what he would do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's much. He's in some. Eragon was curious, but he was curious to just obtain, like, get the, we go 2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah.
It seems like Murtagh's curious to know why is 2 2.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, this also leads, and I also think it might speak to a different educational background.
I think that makes
Like
a lot
a
of
liberal
sense.
arts education. You know what I mean? Bring back a liberal arts education, everybody. Speaking of engineers, I'm just kidding. I know.
What if it's so weird that like it makes so much sense to me that those two things are connected?
They
because
are,
he's
yeah.
very interested in concepts, and I think engineers in a lot of ways, even though it's crunchy, they're like, if I can understand the concept of how something works,
Yeah.
I can like extrapolate that
And
and
apply
map it
it.
onto
Yeah.
so many different situations to solve problems.
Well, anyways, it sounds like we could talk about that for a while, but Murtagh changes. He like moves to a different topic.
Yeah.
He starts to get wistful and like longing about losing his Eldenari.
Yes, I did think that was weird.
And I was very interested in this.
Yeah.
As soon I was like perked up right away. We learned that Gal lent Murtagh 3, mostly insane, but
yeah.
there was a male dragon Eldenari named Yingmar,
Yeah.
who was mad through torture, which is sad.
sad.
And his thoughts were often unintelligible. But what I found weird is that Murtagh and Thorn miss their insane little friend because the Eldenari mind gave them comfort, just having another person.
Yeah.
So this is how alone these two guys were, or how they felt, right?
Yes.
That the insane tortured dragon Yingmar was like comforting.
Well, and I think they think like when he did give them information, it made them feel like they had some sort of control over the world, you know, like whatever tidbits he was able to impart through the ranting.
Yeah. It's also it leads to something very important, Jacqui.
Yes.
We get verifiable proof that Murtagh was made as strong and as fast as an elf by the Eldenai. Play the tape,
Oh,
Kevin.
God.
I believe I pointed this
Oh, my God.
out. This was likely happening in one of my deep dives, and I
Yes.
didn't like it because it caused some problems with the magic system.
Yes.
And Eragon's inability to do the same thing and all the things we learned about that. So I'm happy about it because we learned it, but this is what happened. We finally get some answers, and I hate to say it.
Yes.
I hate to say it.
I hate to say that you were right.
But I was right.
That is your least favorite thing to talk about.
Makes me so mad to say it. But
I was a little bummed, I think, not because I was wrong,
Yeah.
but because I think my headcanon about it, that it like had a little more to do with shade magic, just I think deepens the way that magic can interact in this world.
Yes,
And,
totally.
so I liked that idea. I kind of still
I liked your idea too.
I kind of still think it's true.
my
I'm not
God.
going to lie. I am stubborn in the face of evolving information, Dane.
Well, all this Eldenari talk quickly makes Murtagh feel like Eragon starting a new hold for the Dragon Riders while he wanders the wilderness alone is deeply unfair.
Yeah.
And I love our emo character.
Yes.
I love Murtagh.
Oh, we know, Dane.
But come on, man. You know what I mean? What happened to you was horrible. Some of this current situation is your own making.
Yes, the fact you're wandering the wilderness is definitely your choice.
Well, like he could have just accepted Eragon's invite.
Yes.
He'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah, so true. You could have your Ingmar back.
Yes, he could be with Ingmar. He could be also starting the Dragonhold.
What do you think Eragon thinks of Ingmar? Because they're buds now, right?
I think,
Gotta
aren't
be.
they locked down deep in the mountains and like they only
Or I
go
guess
to-
a better question, what do you think Elva thinks of Ingmar? Because she probably hangs out with him more if he's crazy.
he's probably easier to help if Murtagh was able to like communicate with him every
True.
now and then. So
Yeah.
maybe he's rehabilitated.
Hey,
Maybe Eragon's snooping on what he knows about Murtagh.
here's hoping.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. It's like if Eragon were doing it, it would be like, I miss my boy. Like, how was he when you were with him? That's so sad. Like, he would be having so much empathy for Murtagh
Yes.
and like what he'd gone through, and he would be genuinely interested to like find out more. I mean, I think that's why we got this whole episode in the book of short stories, is because Eragon, like, without asking the dragons saw how like in how much turmoil, how lonely, how like unsettled Eragon was getting, being isolated, and they showed him a vision of Murtagh to be like, hey, here's what your boy's up to.
Yeah, there's stuff going on, dude. And your friends around. Look at that. Get comfy. Murtagh and Eragon feel differently about each other in a way that is so diametrically opposed.
Yes.
That it is a little sad. I will say I don't love it because it is, a lot of this is not fair. I understand it.
I was just going to say,
I understand why he's angry.
Yeah.
I understand the resentment because already I feel like resentment is coming through loud and clear.
I guess from a story perspective, I do love it. I'm like, it makes a lot of sense. And like,
I see.
there's
How
some
did this
stuff-
happen to me? I want our Bean Boy to be treated right.
I do too. No, absolutely. That is what
Yeah.
I want. But I feel like it creates potential for a good arc to get them there.
Yes.
You know what
totally,
I mean?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was taught by very good tutors, but wasn't a big fan of math. We learned that. Same dude. Another way with the same.
Never mind. I take back everything I said about engineering.
He hated the propaganda history 101 courses he had to take, the gal taught, which confirms something we also talked about a lot in the first book, Jax. The people of the empire, including the nobles, just didn't know the truth of it all. They had a totally different history.
So true. I'm just now thinking, how many times in this book are we going to hear, this confirms something we thought. Did we think it, Dane?
It's all paying off. It's all been a long con.
Everything's coming up deep dive.
Play the tape again, Kevin. No, I'm just kidding. Murtagh has, anyway, taken to writing poetry lately.
Love that.
That's right. Our emo boy got even more emo and loves to write poetry. We get one
oh my God. Wait, so you were telling me that as an emo teen, got a little older, started writing poetry, like leans into being a bit of a dandy? Like that's kind of the arc he's on? I'm like, is Murtagh on the classic teen angst to hipster coffee shop guy pipeline?
100%.
Like, is that his journey in this world?
At least for a bit. He's going to make a stop there.
Yes.
Yeah, he does let's all snap it up for Murtagh.
Yes.
Anyway, the specific form he's into is called Attenrack.
Oh.
Which was created by Atten. Yes.
The rack? No. do you think...
The rack?
Atten, the rack.
Yeah.
Do you mean to tell me he doesn't just read and write any poetry, Dane? Maybe he only liked Atten's stuff before he got big?
He totally is. He's like, the poetry you write is just not as good.
He doesn't just listen to pop music, Dane. He listens to the Smiths, but not their latest stuff.
Exactly. Oh, is that a haiku?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when I wrote haikus. I'm doing Attenrack now.
Exactly.
Anyway,
Yeah. That's the vibe.
Yep. I'm thinking he needs to start some beef with Eragon, and they can write poems back and forth, get everyone interested in their beef. You know what I mean?
Because Eragon wrote that epic poem.
Yes. They could.
For the Agaiity Blotner.
We need.
Never forget, rough but true.
Yes, we could have instead of an east side west way, you could have a north side south side situation.
I would be so unbalanced though, because Murtagh's poems are like these short, like peppy little numbers, and Eragon's would go on for 1 hour because it's the Iliad.
They'd be really well produced. You know what I mean?
So true.
Anyway, moving on. We learn as they camp that Thorin suffers from claustrophobia. Another mental illness he's suffering from, or I don't even know what is that called? Is that a mental illness, claustrophobia, or is that a phobia?
A phobia.
It's just a phobia.
A fear.
He feels confined in some trees in this section, and it's very sad. Gal fucked this dragon up good.
Yes. Yeah. Really sad.
Then they go to bed, and Murtagh has some nightmares, and it's clear that he's a man full of regret and great traumas, and that he really loved Nesawada. He thinks that there might have been a moment after the Battle of Trondheim when he and Nesawada could have, courted and been a thing. It's a sad thought, and his anger at it is even more crushing because, it's funny. I don't really think of that time period. We don't really spend much time on it.
No.
But it is clearly a fundamental moment in Murtagh's life that he thinks on and reflects on often, which makes a ton of sense.
Yes. Well, I think it gives a lot more depth to once we saw him back with Neswada, it was like, wait, these two are into each other? And it's like, oh yeah, he was obsessed with this period in his life. I think it was the first time he felt like he had a chance at freedom.
Yeah. He was happy.
Yeah.
It seemed like.
I mean, and he was in prison, so that really says a lot.
Yeah, the bar was low.
Nice prison. It was interesting, too. I think the way he thought about, courting, because they were both of nobility and, from the same state. I was like, okay, yeah, this guy, you're right. He's a dandy.
He's bringing up class a lot.
So true.
He then works through the forms on Zark when he wakes.
Yeah.
And the way the sword is written by Paolini, it sounds evil. And it sounds like Murtagh is kind of scared of it.
Yes.
It sounds like he thinks Eldon reflects on the evil his dad did with it while it's in his hands.
Absolutely.
And it's really yucky. I really liked it, but I also I liked it reading this section. But man, Murtagh, it just sounds like the mindset is always so sad.
Yeah, it's like his only treasure of antiquity is this thing that he's just like, ugh, ick.
Look at all the murder it did.
Yeah.
It sounds like they both have some nightmares and flashbacks about their misdeeds and horrors of wars. It continues to go on. It's sad, but it seems like it's possibly going to be a healing life in time if they keep traveling and just working through it. It does lack people though, and I wonder if that makes it something that's not going to work ultimately. It's hard to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the whole crux of it seems like this could be potentially this isn't always a bad thing if you have a lot of trauma, is to like
take some time.
Yeah, work through it. But
exercise, travel.
Yeah, it's like also if you are just clearly running from the problem of your isolation, it's maybe not going to go well.
Yeah, and we learned that Murtagh and Thorn made a visit to Vrongard, which was fun to hear about.
Yeah.
Also didn't listen to.
No.
I think they were not told to go there. Anyway, they left in a hurry because they found it sad and haunting. Yeah, and I wonder if he wrote any poems.
Do you remember that place?
Yeah,
sad and haunting.
It was sad and haunting. I do wonder if he wrote any poems about snails, though. Yeah, because I penned one. Because Murtagh was penning poems, so I penned one.
Wait! I am dumbstruck. You wrote a poem.
I wrote a poem about snails. Yeah.
Attenrack?
Yeah, it is. I think Attenrack. I can't be certain. Here we go. In Rowengard, the snails do roam with big ass shells for homes. Fast they slide through evil history. The dumb snail, like me, in eccentricity. I messed up that last word, but you get it. You get it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, reading snail poems I wrote on my podcast is not where I thought my life would go, but here we are.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know how you didn't see it coming. You kicked off this episode with a joke about how you used to write poetry, Dane.
It's true.
I'm just glad this one wasn't emo.
Really true. Really true. There is there's a website where you can post poetry.
Yeah.
That I posted a poem on.
Stop.
That went a little viral.
Stop.
But I did not know about it because I wrote it on there.
What's the
Didn't get
website?
Immediate gratification.
Oh my God.
Left. And then years later, like it just popped up because I was looking for my poem and I knew I wrote it. And it had like comments and tons, like thousands and thousands of likes.
What?
Yes. And so like then I tried to get into my account, but couldn't get into my account. So just I have no idea. So it is there.
This is so classic ADD.
Yes, you can find a poem I wrote on the internet somewhere if you look hard enough.
What's that website?
I don't remember.
Dang.
I would plug it, but they don't sponsor us, so we're gonna keep going on.
No. God.
These two also do something pretty cool that I think Eragon and Saphira never did. They spar with each other at night.
Oh yeah.
And I'd love to see how they do this. They just sound like bros. The friendship between them seems different. You know what it is? It sounds like two young brothers.
Yeah.
It's like more brotherly relation. They have a bunch of fun. They get bruises and cuts. They even razz each other afterwards.
Yeah.
It's dope. I don't know. I like it.
I feel like when you keep saying brothers, there's some sort of like even playing field here that like maybe was a little more absent.
Yeah, and we reached the end of this section of brotherly love or whatever was absent in the other relationship with Thorn and Murtagh arriving at their destination, Gilead.
It's time.
And Murtagh thinks of it as a horrible place.
Oh, great.
Remembering the prison break times with Eragon.
Oh yeah, don't they land on the same like hilltop?
And he could see that building and remarks on the roof being replaced.
Yeah, this is where they were when Saphira like airlifted them over the river, right?
He's looking at it. Yeah, it's wild.
The prison break times, Dane. Such fond memories, like infrastructure crumbling, elf napping, high-speed chases. What more could you want, really?
Nothing. It was peak.
I mean, other than maybe to pick apart the writing style and literary devices until you feel like every single thing that comes up must have a deeper meaning. Is that what more you could want?
That's not us, right?
Never would.
We should write a poem about it.
I won't.
Give me a second. Attenrack is hard, but I can do it.
You could puzzle it out.
It's time for analysis.
I think this first crack at analyzing Murtagh is going to be a little broader than usual because rather than talk about one theme for the section, I want to dig a little bit into Christopher Paolini's writing on more of a macro level, like specifically what we're seeing in terms of writing style shifts with this author returning to this world.
Okay.
I know we both made comments on this subject when we read the book of short stories, especially when it came to like the interstitial scenes with Eragon. There was some implicit humor reading that character a bit more grown up and world weary in a way we thought as adults, obviously, only an adult can write. And as aging people ourselves revisiting this story from our childhoods, like I think there was something about Eragon's mundane frustrations in the middle of this fantastical world that really had us laughing through the book of short stories. And I think starting this new phase of the World of Eragon by retelling one of those short stories, but in the point of view of our familiar character this time around, is a good way to sort sort of wink at readers that, yes, some of this book is going to tread back over themes from the other tales in this world, but we're also going to find some ways to like subvert what you think is coming or like recontextualize things you think you know here. So I kind of like that little like, okay, Paolini, I see you.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to do here.
Yes. I also think that in retelling the Fork story with that point of view shift from a child's to an adult's, my brain immediately is starting to get inklings that this book and its possible successors are likely to be a more mature departure from what I think in the original Inheritance cycle is pretty solidly like young adult trappings of that world and like the way it's written.
It definitely feels that way.
Yes. So it's like, okay, we've jumped from kid to adult. We maybe have jumped from YA into something, maybe not adult fantasy, but maybe like new adult or something in the midst there. So for me, Murtagh like ruminating on and delving into some like bleak specifics of really weighty and nuanced topics like we talked about in the summaries, like their mental health struggles and kind of the darkness that is a big piece of their past. It makes a lot of sense if we're expecting a little bit of a tone shift, like getting the signals from just the way this is structured to see, something different's going to go on here.
Yeah, I mean, even our episode today had to be different because of the vibe of this part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. And I think in that same vein, like the plotting in this first section feels like a departure too from the Inheritance cycle with a couple of familiar elements for good measure. We don't want to feel like we're somewhere completely different, you know? We still have our main character setting off on a journey with his dragon to work against a big shadowy evil in the world. It's like, okay, I've been there. But think about what's missing here. Like you said, there's no guide or mentor. There's no clear-cut boogeyman to hunt down, and there's no obvious way to solve the problem that they're looking at. It makes sense again to me that we're maturing the writing style along with our characters, because everything from the plot beats to the world building to the character development like feels a lot less linear, a lot more shades of gray here, I
yes,
think.
Totally.
It's like we're clearly still on a fantasy hero's journey, but this time we don't know where we're going. We don't know a lot about the world, and we're just going to have to figure it out along with Murtagh.
And even the complexities of Murtagh himself we've talked about,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. So I think with all that said about potential maturing of the tone, the start of this book does still feel so much like Christopher Paolini's writing to me. I feel like this is the least rigorous and like most subjective point to make, but there just is like a vibe to his writing, like with some of the descriptive language, like turns of phrase he uses sometimes that lets me know like I'm in the world of Eragon. This does, for all that I said, that things about the start of this book feel different. I know who's writing it. Like I have no doubts about that.
He definitely has a style. Like, he definitely has a voice.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, for all we joked about our bean farmer and his like salt of the earth brother, cousin, and father, uncle, I did laugh out loud when like coming from those books, we have maybe an uppity coffee shop hipster here, and still we're getting phrases, descriptions like face like a winter rutabaga. I was like, okay, yeah, this is Christopher. If that's not textbook Christopher Paolini, I do not know what it is.
The man loves a rutabaga.
He really does. So I think it's some of those things that like maybe just from reading the original series so closely, I feel like are here in this new book and like give me that grounding. So I'm like, I don't know when it's coming, but I do feel sure at some point we're going to be talking about horse flesh. Like this is Christopher Paolini. This is fantasy. Up. It's coming for us.
Yes.
I would love to know though, like, are there any like specifics you were picking up on as far as similarities or differences in the writing between the opening of this book and the original Inheritance cycle?
It's interesting you asked me that. Just kidding.
I'm so glad you've asked.
I'm so glad you asked.
Sometimes I like to write a whole segment and I'm like, I'll just ask Dane the question I spent a week writing to answer just right on the spot.
I didn't see this in the script, so I'm like, it's interesting you asked me that. No, I do think there is a direct difference for me. Yeah. I feel like we're very much... You know, it's not just the bond is different. It's not just that the character is more complex immediately, shades of gray. There's some bad stuff. There's some good stuff. It's not just the world has changed, the things we know of the world. There seems to be a darker tone.
Yeah.
Maybe because of all the cynicism. Maybe it's because of the traumas. Maybe as a whole, that is just these characters are different.
Yeah.
But it is, this whole part one feels less fantastical in a way.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
And more constrained. And I think he's trying to do that because Murtagh kind of feels trapped, maybe.
Yeah. And he talks about it in this section. That's
Yeah.
a good point. Like, he feels confined to his bond. He feels stuck in his life in a way that he obviously, I mean, when we're like, don't run from your problems, bro, he doesn't see that. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't see that there are different choices he could be making or ways around some of the, like, big picture problems he's facing, not just this, like, this tenuous mystery
Yeah.
he's trying to solve. I think, is what you're getting at all related to, like, not knowing where this book is going necessarily, not feeling like there's a clear call to action here? We know what.
Yeah, because even the thing that like we're being called to, I think you even just kind of talked on it. It's like it, and we did in our chapter summaries. He doesn't need to do this. This doesn't seem like it's very important.
And we have no idea what it is.
We have no idea what it
is. From the
is.
jump with Eragon, like, Brom told us the whole evil story of Gal. We
Yes.
know who that guy is.
Well,
we know.
It was propaganda, but I'm just kidding.
Exactly. But we knew who that guy was. We knew we were going out to defeat him. We saw the Rozak. We knew
Yes.
they were on the trail. Like,
They were clearly evil, right?
Yes.
And while Saros, we did talk about, was cartoonishly evil.
yeah.
He's just a guy. You know, Murtagh killed Eragon. Murtagh killed him with a fork. You know, so
And we just know nothing about Bashel. We know
Yeah.
nothing about why this magic is malfunctioning.
And I think there is an essence here of like there maybe is someone better than Murtagh to do this. Like, you know, we talked a lot about it, but like these guys are struggling
yeah.
mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
Maybe going on an adventure to fight a big evil is probably not the solution to the problem.
Yes.
But I think that's the thing I'm talking about. It's this lie that we're in. We're in the confused state.
Yes,
which we
because
weren't in the
the
first
characters
book.
in the confused state.
Yes.
And I think it's probably a good choice for Christopher Paolini to bring this character back and not give us cut and dried, like, he's a good guy, he's going to go solve the problem. That's not what we saw with him at all in the original series.
That's why people loved him.
Yes, we watched him make really bad choices a
Yes.
lot of the time there. So it feels really, like, consistent with that here, that we're watching him just, like, not really have that self-reflection, not have like, you know, the presence of security to do what he actually should be doing versus, like, kind of chasing this wild hare
It's funny.
ill-advisedly.
It's funny to say this, and I don't know if this is like obvious. I mean, it is obvious, but like, whereas Eragon felt like a naive farm guy,
Yeah.
who was trying to do right, you know, and
Yes.
in a simplistic situation,
Yeah.
Murtagh very much feels like a rich, like well pampered man with a traumatic childhood,
Yeah.
who is also trying to do right, and maybe they go about that and feel about that very differently, and I think
Yes.
that is coming through. So I think it's a win already. I think he's nailing
I think
it.
so,
Yeah.
but I think it definitely feels different.
It
It's like,
feels- yeah.
I know this is Chris. I know this is Algazia,
Yeah.
but, like, something here is definitely, our writing style is a little different here.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking us through the depth of your thought on that, Dane.
Oh well,
You
I had
have
so much time to think about it.
any more depth to plumb?
Yeah, well, we did go deep on that, but we're about to take a deeper dive and a deep dive.
Yes.
In this section, I want to talk about the differences between Eragon and Saphira as a bonded pair and Murtagh and Thorn as a bonded pair. We've had some clues that these two writers are nothing alike.
One or two.
Yeah, and since we haven't been in the POV of another writer in this series yet, I just wanted to explore how different it seems and what surprised me about it. And so, like, first I want to talk about Thorn. Even with how little we are into this book, we're just in part 1.
Yeah.
We already see some differences that separate Thorn from Saphira.
Yeah.
The first and most obvious is the joke we got right at the start of the story where Thorn says that they should go in disguise as Eragon and Saphira. I didn't mention it at the time, but it's pretty funny. Which is different from Saphira, who made jokes, but not in this way. More like, I'm a dragon, and humanoids are goofy. These were funny jokes too, but I think also Saphira would have considered pretending to be anyone else, debasing and beneath her.
Yeah, for sure.
And this gives us a little insight into Thorn and his ability to laugh at himself and not take himself as seriously as Saphira, who takes herself pretty seriously.
Yes, she definitely doesn't want to be poked fun at and does not want to poke any fun at herself.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of the humor in Saphira's character was more just watching her as this like alien other interact with the world of like puny humans. So it was like situational humor around her where, like you said, Thorn is he's working out material.
Yeah, and like even if he wouldn't actually do it, the fact that he would joke about it does say he cares less.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Thorn also seems not to want to be separated for different reasons. Saphira, we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm getting more of I'm a little scared to be alone vibe from Thorn. And I could be wrong. We have more to read. But that's what I'm reading between the lines here.
Okay.
And it seems like Thorn is much less sure of himself in a way I can't quite pinpoint yet this early. This leads to another interaction in this section where Murtagh wants to check things out. And Thorn says both that they don't have to prove themselves and that this trouble might be over their heads. It's interesting because Saphira was also always keeping Eragon from doing stupid things, but by the end, she had this element of we are rider and dragon, or like fundamental trust in Eragon that seemed to be like there seemed to be lacking here, to be quite honest.
Even as much as we're like, maybe she's in charge of the bond, like I think because she seems so in charge, her reactions to Eragon's decision-making change over the course of the story. So that exactly by the end, she's like, okay, you've got this.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
And there's like a yoke of responsibility for who they are.
Yes,
that
for
like
sure.
Thorn seems to be totally devoid of.
Yeah.
At least right here.
Well, I think there's a lot of it we talked about in the original Inheritance cycle that Saphira thinks often, and it really comes through in her characterization that she knows she's the last of her race. She is the only surviving member. There's a loneliness to her right up until the point she meets Glader that like, I think especially if those were her formative months of life from that point of view, like I think that maybe is what gives her that kind of responsibility. And Thorn just never, I mean, Thorn had his own really horrible shit to go through, but that wasn't
his story
on his mind ever.
Well,
you know,
I mean, maybe it was, but it immediately was ended after the war. So he knows that he's not. He knows he's not.
Well,
like,
he already knew from the time he was born. He knew Saphira was out there.
Yeah,
because
that's
Murtagh
true.
did.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? He
and
just
not long
never,
after he knew Glader was a thing.
Yes,
you know,
he
so
never
it is
was
different.
the last of his
Yeah,
race.
that's true. Well, anyway, that's really interesting. I had not thought about that. Finally, there's the claustrophobia that Thorn struggles with in these chapters, and I had a feeling it was going to come up again, and it was because it was introduced so early.
Okay,
but it's a pretty big handicap for like a giant dragon, and speaks to an element of fear being a defining characteristic for Thorn that Saphira just did not have.
Yeah.
She had no phobias that
true.
she was working through, which leads me to Murtagh. He straight up says that their bond has a, quote, sense of confinement. Never could they escape from one another.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy quote. And while true and not necessarily terrible, it's a different tone than Eragon's thoughts about Saphira. Yeah. Eragon only thinks about her this way when he's trying to get it on with Triana most of the time. But most of the time he felt joy, gratitude, a deep belonging in his bond with Saphira, like he was complete. He talks a lot, especially in the later book, and I know it's early, but for this book, but especially in the later books, he talks a lot about feeling connected, whole.
Yes.
You know,
because we watch them separate so often.
Yes.
And it was such a hurdle for them to get through missing a piece of their soul.
Yes, and Murtagh feels claustrophobic, it seems like.
Yes. Which is an interesting mirror, too, to Thorn. It's like he feels claustrophobic just in a different way.
It's so crazy. Maybe there is something to that loop bond thing we were talking about. Another difference that really stuck out to me was that Murtagh and Thorn also spar in this section.
Yeah.
And this is such a boy behavior to me. I know I'm generalizing here, and women also get rough with each other. But as a kid, my son is as different when he hangs out with his like friends who are boys and when he hangs out with his friends who are girls. And this kind of reminded me of that. You know, I don't know the reasons for that. We can unpack that later. But there's something so equalizing and fun about wrestling with your buddy.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you imagine Saphira and Eragon wrestling? She would just put her claw on his chest over and over and say, dead.
Yeah, she would. I think there's a certain amount of Thorn. Maybe it's because, like you said, he's not taking himself as seriously.
Yeah.
That he's willing to like get down and like give Murtagh some openings to like wrestle at him and like try to take him down. Where Saphira would just be like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah, like above it.
In
almost.
what universe? And obviously she's right. Eragon never 1-on-1, no weapons, no magic is gonna do anything to her. But like Thorn doesn't care about things like that.
It does seem like he can. It goes to like laugh laughing at himself again or not taking himself so seriously again.
Which is funny because he has elements of that vanity that Saphira does, but it's just in such a different, it's through such a different lens.
It's coming out different. Yeah. So there isn't a lot to go on yet, but this is something, and I want to keep an eye on it. I think we can say that the bond is quite different. There is a different, more equal maybe, or even Murtagh dominated bond here, where it was more Saphira dominated, I think, in the Eragon-Saphira bond. Yeah. Also, there was always a seriousness with Saphira and Eragon that is definitely not the vibe here. These dudes just aren't very seriously internally.
Yeah, with each other at least. I mean, it's as much as they go through serious shit and like think very heavy topics, I think themselves, or even talk about them together, they're still like, they're always just trying to joke through the pain, which like the game recognized game, guys.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Sometimes they should start a podcast.
I would listen to that.
Well, how are you feeling about our emo boy thus far in comparison with Eragon and Saphira, Jess?
Yeah, I definitely think that like there is a difference. I'm not sure to what degree like gender plays on that. You don't necessarily want to just be like, well, they're dudes and it's different. But
well, and I hate to bring it up because like that's a cultural conditioning thing. That's not like women and men. That's a whole bag to open up. But I do think we generalize in that way. And I also don't want to couch it there. I just was trying to say that it had an element of something of that or something.
Yes, I think maybe there's something about Eragon and Saphira. Maybe it's just the pressure cooker that they were born into.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Yes, it's always Maybelline, really. But I think between that and just having this different, more like, because I don't think there's anything maternal about Saphira, but I definitely don't think anybody would say that Eragon and Saphira are like brother and sister, where Murtagh and Thorn really seem, you say often, like brothers. There is some sort of leveling of the playing field, some sort of equality to them that like Eragon and Saphira felt like. I think when Saphira was born, Eragon felt like her dad. He was very much taking care of her like a baby. And we saw that flip as Saphira grew in her power and like in her surety that she always knew what was right, where she in a lot of ways was trying not to nurture Eragon, so maybe that's why it's not really maternal. Yeah. But she was trying to like protect him and guide him and like,
you know what it is?
What?
You just said it, and I feel like we figured it out. We're thinking way too hard about this. Eragon and Saphira are squares. That's what this is. Internally, Eragon and Saphira are squares. Yeah. And these other guys are just dudes hanging out. Like even if Thorn was a girl, they would just be like shooting the shit. Hanging out, having a good time. Because they're not squares. I think that's what this is. They don't take themselves too seriously. Like, they want other people to take them seriously, but internally they're like, whatever.
Whatever, we're fine.
Or it's self-hatred. It's maybe a little bit, maybe it's a dash of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to Eragon and Saphira, like, from the jump, just having, like you said, this yoke of responsibility. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
And having to rise to the occasion and trying to figure out every step of the way with their guidance, with their mentors around them, like how they were going to defeat this problem. Whereas Murtagh and Thorn from the jump were just absolutely in the shit. Like their torture was so horrible. I think maybe this is a response to like, well, damn, at least we're alive. At least we're not in a cage. Like, it's just such a different.
Do you think it's gallows humor type?
A little bit, I kind of do. And that's just obviously me projecting, but like, I think I very much have that sense of humor that's just like, oh, is this really bad? We should probably joke about it. It's the only way. It's the only way to be. So I think it makes sense to me given where they came from.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I totally agree. I think we're both right.
Amazing. What an episode.
Should we just end it here?
Yeah. Everybody's right. Everybody agrees.
Well, we don't want to kick off this season with the hater segment.
Okay.
And those goons don't deserve a precious Sindri given time, Jax. Also, there's just less haters because this book is so new.
Yeah.
And the old haters are all 20 years older. Okay. So they likely have lives now.
Whoa.
Hear that, haters? You got a life.
You did it, haters.
All jokes aside, haters, you know. I love you. There just wasn't a lot to start here in this first ep, but we will be diving into the sea of hate next week and the weeks after that.
Sea of Hate, Ocean of Hate. Yeah, I think that makes
I'm a
lot of
poet now.
that makes sense. Like where the original books were coming out and the people who didn't like the series were very on top of it. It's like they've moved on since then.
I mean, you would hope.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I do have one last question before we wrap up. Get some of your final important hard hitting thoughts on this section.
Do it.
If you were backed into a corner like Murtagh, what would your goofy improvised weapon of choice be, Dane?
Oh, dude, I know instantly.
What?
Yeah, ever since I saw
God, you're so annoying.
the first Jason Bourne movie where he knife fights a man with a pen and he finds it on his desk and just handily messes that dude up.
Of course that lives rent free in the back of your head.
I have wanted to relive that scene. Top 5 all-time action scenes for me because it's so crazy at the time. I had never seen any. Kevin, did you see anything at the like that was crazy at the time? It was so cool. I was like 12 or 13.
Oh my God.
And I just remember thinking Jason Bourne is the coolest hero of all time. You know what? We're wrapping this up. You guys want to sit back and watch the first Jason Bourne movie? It's so fucking cool.
I mean, no.
Kevin's in. I can see Kevin's in. Yeah, that's a nod.
I'm down. Okay. Well, do you want to wrap it up? We got Bourne Identity to watch, dog.
The Bourne Identity to watch. Thank you for listening. Make sure to rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. Support on Patreon and check out our social media at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok or at Just Fantasy Pod on Instagram.
Yes.
If you have any questions or just want to write us about the podcast, we'd love to hear from you, and you can email us at isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you want to keep pace and read along with us, the next episode is a chonker. We will be covering all of part 2. So that's chapter 1, Hostile Territory, through chapter 17, Exile, on our next episode.
And we're going to go Exile because we're going to watch Bourne movie.
Yes, fantasy. We're just 2 nerds and we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.